How did we as a culture get from wearing tunics, robes, gowns, and togas to cargo shorts and mom jeans? How did pants go from being a sign of barbarism to being one of the only requirements to eat at a Waffle House? And why do we call them pants? So what was it that led to the invention of pants in the first place? Tunic and gown-wearing ancients must have had an overwhelming pile of cultural and practical reasons to abandon that breezy, free-flowing feeling enjoyed still today by those who wear dresses, skirts, kilts, and bathrobes in favor of wrapping each leg individually, right?
Doth mother know you weareth her drapes?
Well, no. There was really only one reason for pants, and that reason was horses. As Science News explains, the oldest known pants come from Central Asia between 3,000 and 3,300 years ago, among nomadic herding cultures who found pants the best option for riding horses. The oldest pants so far discovered are from China's Tarim Basin, but pants were also worn by other nomadic equestrian cultures, like the Scythians about 2,500 years ago. These early pants were straight-legged with a wide crotch, sewn together from wool cloth with slits on the side, a string fastener, and decorative weaving in the legs. Interestingly, the Tarim Basin pants seem to have been woven to their final size with no cutting involved in their shaping. No word on whether the first pants wearer's mother embarrassed him in front of the entire nomadic shopping mall by making him come out of the dressing room and turning around to show how they fit on his butt. The ancient Greeks were not a pants-wearing people. They didn't like them. Instead, they tended to wear long, flowing linen or wool garments that were belted or pinned in place. Men usually wore a linen tunic, over which they might wear a wool cloak in the winter. Women wore tunics pinned at the shoulder. Greeks hated pants because, as Vintage News explains, they thought they were ridiculous, but also because they associated them with foreigners. Pants were what Persians and other cultures wore. They were the clothes of barbarians, not a civilized Greek. The Romans, of course, followed the Greek attitude on pants. The Latin word bricatus, which literally means wearing pants, was used to refer to people that Romans thought were foreign, barbarous, and, perhaps ironically, given our modern view of pants, effeminate. As Atlas Obscura points out, Roman hatred of pants was pretty much just straight-up nonsense, with the circular logic that pants were not sophisticated because sophisticated people don't wear pants. When the great Roman orator Cicero wanted to condemn the behavior of Gauls, he referenced their military cloaks and their breeches as signs of their innate aggression. However, by the time of the early empire, Roman soldiers were suddenly discovering that the swishy potato sacks with armholes that worked so well in a Mediterranean climate weren't up for the job of retaining territory in Germany, Switzerland, Britain, and elsewhere. Taking cues from their new Gaulish allies, Roman soldiers began wearing pants to protect their borders and their thighs from the Goths. Before long, this military fashion caught on with civilians as well, and by 397 CE, in the waning days of the Roman Empire, brothers and co-emperors Honorius and Arcadius issued a decree banning civilians from wearing pants in the capital. In the end, though, bad news for the Romans meant good news for pants. The trousers ban ended when Alaric and his pants-wearing Visigoth army sacked Rome, more or less making the fall of the Western Empire in 476 inevitable. In a complete 180 from the Roman pants ban stands the mandatory pants reform of Peter I of Russia, better known as Peter the Great, in the 17th century. Wherefore the Romans' pants were a symbol of barbarism and otherness that needed to be wiped out. For Peter, they were a sign of civilization and modernity that needed to be brought in at any cost. Plus, they made dancing easier.
Mamushka! Mamushka! He comes with one mushka!
When Peter became sole Tsar of Russia in 1696, the country hadn't progressed much in about 6 centuries. The isolationist tsardom was ruled by a wealthy class of nobles called boyars who, together with the crazy powerful Orthodox Church, maintained their wealth and power thanks to an enormous, powerless serf class. The fashion of choice was long robes, long coats, and long beards. However, Europe of this time was experiencing an explosion of progress in technology and trade and was soon knocking on Russia's door. Peter had been raised by a Western-educated mother and had himself traveled through Enlightenment-era Europe in disguise and soaked in their culture, and he was determined to drag Russia kicking and screaming into the 18th century. A major element of his modernization efforts was wardrobe reform, which meant robe-wearing boyars suddenly found themselves forced to wear pants and other Western-style outfits under penalty of a hefty fine if they tried to enter Moscow. Peter's reforms met a lot of resistance, but pants won out in the end. The word pants can be pretty funny. It turns out that comedy is in the very DNA of the word pants, so maybe that's why.
But these are my recreation clothes.
You probably already know that the word pants is short for pantaloons, but what you might not know is that pantaloons is an anglicization of the Italian word pantalone. Pantalone, in turn, was a character in a hugely popular Renaissance-era form of Italian comic theater. As Merriam-Webster explains, Pantalone was a greedy, lecherous, scheming old man who often ended up being duped and humiliated, and who could be recognized by his costume, which included a brimless hat, an open black cassock, and long trousers. When a similar style of pants became popular in Restoration England, they named their new fashion after the comedy character famous for his pants, like how super short cutoff jeans would later be called Daisy Dukes. While pants is the generic term for a garment worn from waist to ankles while covering each leg separately in American English, the preferred term for such a garment in British English is trousers. The word trousers can be traced back to a Gaelic word meaning close-fitting shorts, which by the 1570s could be found in English as trous and then trousers a decade later. The R at the end probably got added by the influence of drawers and other words described as a pair like tweezers and pliers. But even in American English, where it's not the generic term, trousers can be heard in certain contexts. Specifically, trousers is used to mean a tailored pair of pants with a waistband, belt loops, and a fly front.
Why are you wearing trousers?
Slacks, meanwhile, indicate less formal, untailored, usually off-the-rack dress pants, which are often made of smooth wool knits, which tend to hang, wait for it, slack. Khakis are dress casual pants, usually light tan in color. Chinos are flat front dress pants, often light beige in color. And then there are jeans, but hopefully you know what those are. Before the full-length open-leg trousers we know today became the default form of pants, European pants took multiple different forms. Namely, these are breeches, pantaloons, and knickerbockers. Prior to the late 16th century, the main term for leg coverings was hose, which were generally separate coverings for each leg joined by a codpiece, but these were replaced by breeches, which were a single sewn-together garment. Breeches usually ended right below the knee or midway down the calf, with either boots or stockings worn below if a gentleman wanted to show off some of his sexy leg day gains.
I can do the splits, no problem.
Breeches fell out of fashion by 1820 and were replaced by pantaloons, which were slimmer fitting and reached down to the ankle. By the 1840s, looser fitting trousers replaced the tight pantaloon, inspired by sailors who popularized the look. But knee-length pants saw a resurgence in popularity in the 20th century in the form of knickerbockers, which are baggy kneed pants that end at or just below the knee.
Half pants, right, Mr. Franklin?
Knickers, in fact, yes.
He's in his knickers.
These were popular for young boys in the early 20th century and remain popular today for sports uniforms. Never has the difference between two styles of pants been bloodier or more political than during the French Revolution. The militant radical partisans of the lower-class common people of France during the French Revolution and Reign of Terror were known as sans-culottes, meaning without breeches. This might make you picture a much sexier revolution than actually occurred until you realize that no breeches doesn't mean they didn't wear any pants, just that they didn't wear a specific kind of pants.
What's going on? Is that French Revolution type of thing?
Culotte in this instance refers to knee-length silk breeches favored by the aristocracy against whom the rebels were rebelling. The working-class radicals who would come to be known as the sans-culottes wore ankle-length pantaloons or trousers. The sans-culottes were the radicals who called for the executions without trial that led to the Reign of Terror. So definitely not as cute and charming as "there's an army in France and they don't wear pants" might have you believe. Still, the association between knee breeches and aristocracy stuck, which caused them to fall out of fashion in the 1800s. Pants, of course, have for most of history been considered men's clothing. But hey, pants are for everyone. In the early 1850s, a women's rights advocate named Amelia Bloomer suggested as rational dress for women a costume made up of a short jacket and a knee-length skirt under which would be worn loose ankle-length trousers. While the full costume didn't last, loose-fitting women's trousers, once very popular for women to wear while bicycling, and of course women's baggy underwear would continue to bear the name bloomers after their most prominent advocate. The fight to make pants a gender-neutral garment in Europe and America has been a long one. It was technically illegal for women to wear pantalon in Paris thanks to the violent reputation of the sans-culotte. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, pants became a more common accessory for some working women, including coal mine workers known as pit brow lasses and pilots. Designers started making pants for women, and they began being considered leisure wear, but women wearing pants in public could still cause a scandal, as happened with actress Katharine Hepburn. Fortunately, World War II helped to normalize the idea of women wearing pants thanks to them becoming common for women working in factories during that time. Even though the progress has not been quick or steady or even unidirectional, it has become much more the norm for it to be cool for women to wear pants when they wanna. Here's a thing that confuses even native speakers of English. Why do you call them a pair of pants? It's only one thing. 2 pairs of pants sounds like it's describing 4 things, when in fact, it is only 2. One popular explanation tries to justify this by saying that in the olden days when pants were pantaloons, they were actually 2 separate things where you put one on each leg and then fasten them in the middle. If you've been paying attention, however, you might note that while this describes medieval hose, this is not true of even the earliest pantaloons. Britannica says nah too. According to them, there's not really any evidence to support the 2-piece pants theory. The fact is, pants is just a linguistic phenomenon known as a plural tantum, which is Latin for plural only.
Well, hello, Mr. Fancy Pants.
English has no shortage of such words. Examples include electronics, odds, surroundings, and thanks. However, English is especially fond of making pluralia tantum out of items that split or divide cleanly into 2 symmetrical halves. Pants are a natural fit with their 2 legs that meet in the middle, as are scissors, tweezers, pliers, and glasses. You never say a scissor or a plier. Also, all of these are described as being a pair despite being technically a single item. Pants aren't really that fancy after all, unless of course they're fancy pants.